Hello, class. Welcome to Unit 2. We're going to talk about leisure, sport, and tourism. And we're going to start with tourism because that's what we're doing our IA on. We're going to talk about some different things about development and culture and how that affects tourism and how countries can have different types of tourism and all sorts of kind of intro stuff. On the left there, that's my favorite place I've ever been on vacation, the island of Kauai on Hawaii. That's where I went on my honeymoon, and it's awesome. It's such a cool natural place. Machu Picchu on the right is a place we're going to talk about this unit, which I've never been to. It sounds like quite the trek to get to Machu Picchu. All right, so what's been happening with tourism? There's a lot of things that affect who goes on vacation and where they go. And tourism is anytime you leave a place, leave your home for like a day and a night. So if you spend at least one day away from home, you're a tourist. So the physical environment of a place could affect who or what kind of tourism happens there. And there are a lot of unique environments in the world that attract tourists. And it's kind of a bonus for low-income countries if they have some sort of unique environment that they can take advantage of. Like in Nepal, they have Mount Everest. That's the highest mountain in the world. People are going to show up to climb it, even if it costs $50,000 on average to actually go through the whole trek. There are also cultural factors or human factors like wealth. If people have more money, they can go on more vacations. There's more middle-class people in the world, so now there's even more people with disposable income, which means money that they can decide to spend on something frivolous or fun, like a vacation. It could be cultural, I'm sure not as many people would show up to Mecca if it weren't that 1 billion Muslims in the world need to go there once in their lifetime. So there's sort of this pilgrimage tourism to Mecca and other places in the world. It could also be just that people kind of go back to their homeland or something, even though it might not feel like tourism to them. It kind of is because they don't live in that country anymore, so they're traveling there and spending money there. It could be age, gender, family situation. So are you single and looking to mingle in New Orleans at Mardi Gras, or are you a family in their 40s going to Disney World? It could also be that political problems could stop people from traveling someplace. So we talked about in Bangladesh how their resorts on the coastline are now filled with refugees, and so maybe that affects if people want to go there on a vacation or not. Tourism has grown over the past decades. It used to be that it was in the tens of millions, and in 2015 there were 1.2 billion people that went away from home for at least one night for leisure. So that is quite a number of people. So why is it growing? Mostly because of wealth. As people have gotten more money, they can go on these trips. It also means that people maybe have paid holidays, they follow the sort of Western world's weekend schedule, and people have time off to go on trips. But the rest is stuff that you're probably familiar with, just being as someone who's in a rich country, that there's lots of mass tourism, cruises that you could go on. There's maybe hotel or airline rewards programs that you're part of. It could be that there is better advertising for different places that are around the world that you could travel to. So there's so many different reasons why more and more people are traveling nowadays. With the improvement of tourism infrastructure, it's a fun fact that it actually is cheaper to fly now than it was in the 50s. So if you look at inflation and prices and kind of how much money is worth that you use to buy a plane ticket, it is cheaper now to fly than it was decades ago. So, more people can afford to leave town. This is a huge benefit to low-income countries, because if they can get people from rich countries to visit their country, that's one way, and a kind of an easy way, to get foreign capital, foreign money injected into your economy. So if you can highlight something of yours that's unique, or you bring people for pilgrimage, or you bring people to see some wonder, then that will help your whole economy. It could lead to conflicts between locals and tourists. It could lead to damage. It could lead to people being in unsafe circumstances, and we'll talk about that as we get to managing tourism. Another fun fact about where people end up is that 80% of people still travel within their region. So, like Europeans, 80% of the time will go to Europe, and Americans, 80% of the time will travel in North America. Yeah, they might go to the Bahamas or go to Montreal or go to Mexico. Not as many people are going to be like, I'm going to the Maldives, or I'm gonna travel to Shanghai or something like that. That's a very long trip, so fewer people are going to make that trip. In the future, it looks like Asia is going to be the growing market for tourism. So the market share of tourism, which means like if you took all the money made on tourism, where is that money being made? It's going to go up from 23% to 30% in by 2030. And Europe's market share is going to go down 10%. So a lot more people going to Asia, which can be an indicator for you that maybe that means there's more people in Asia that have disposable income. So that development is leading people to want to spend money. And because they spend it in that area, they're not traveling as far. They're just going to stay in Asia. And so we have an example over here of Shanghai Disneyland. In their first year, they became the 8th most populated theme park. They had 11 million visitors, which is still half of what Disney World gets in Florida. But the fact that this many people went to this theme park that is not part of Chinese culture is kind of interesting. So some different types of tourism. You need to know about niche tourism, which includes heritage tourism and adventure tourism. A niche is something that appeals to a very small group of people. So if someone is like really into mini golfing, that's their niche sport that they do, because really like who goes like mini golfing that much. So niche tourism is when like you're interested in one like really unique particular kind of tourism. So we have some examples on the bottom here. We're going to talk about the three on the left. The three on the right are interesting, so I wanted to throw them on there. Agritourism is if you go to a farm. I've actually done this with my family. It was kind of fun where we got to help out on the farm for a weekend, but evidently that was agritourism. There's dark tourism, so if you go places where people have died to see those monuments and stuff, that's called dark tourism. And gray tourism is tourism that is specifically for old people. So think like Branson, Missouri. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. There's a lot of old people there. Adventure tourism. It's tourism in which you go on an adventure. Adventure tourism is interesting not just because there's like some cool examples, which I'm going to show you in class, but 2/3 of the money spent on adventure tourism stays within the country. And you might think, Mr. Vandenberg, that's less than 100%, so I don't like that. But you'd be surprised that usually huge companies are the ones making the money off of tourism, not the locals. So this is actually pretty good if 66% of the money stays local. That means like the Sherpas are making the money and Nepal's making the money. It's not Hilton and McDonald's making money off of people going on these trips. It also attracts people that are higher income, so you can charge them more. So I mentioned that Mount Everest, you have to pay in fees and with guides and equipment about $50,000 to go up the mountain. But as you can see in the picture, a lot of people have been very successful. So this has actually led to Everest becoming sort of a trash dump. And it's surprising how many pieces of trash and dead bodies have been littered on the path up the mountain. And Nepal's trying to figure out what to do about it. Heritage tourism. This is what our IA trip is going to be studying. This is travel to a place to experience the history, artifacts, the people of that area. So if if there's like monuments or historical markers or historical events have happened there, then that is heritage tourism. It's really important to manage that area well, because if you let it get destroyed or let it get overburdened, you might ruin that spot and people won't show up anymore. So that's why a big part of our IA is going to be about managing the National Mall. How do you keep people from destroying these sites? How do you keep them looking pristine so people want to go to them? Movie location tourism. This wasn't in the last curriculum, so it's kind of fun that we get to talk about this. So it's people going to places where movies were shot or TV shows were made. And so this is definitely a niche category. I thought that it's cool that there are tours of New Zealand where you can see spots where they made Lord of the Rings. Another example that they talk about a lot in the textbook is the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, so you can pretend like you're a Harry Potter character while you're on vacation. So that's kind of a growing market as well. So I'm wondering what kind of goes off in your head when you think of this, where you might go if you want to see a movie or TV location while you're on vacation. Switching gears a little bit. So with each of these places, these kinds of tourism, there are going to be primary and secondary sites at that locations. And this is going to be a really important term for us, because this is another thing that you could look at on the IA. How do secondary tourist resources support primary tourism? Primary tourist resources are the things that are already there that people came to experience. So when I showed you Kauai in Hawaii, what's so amazing about Kauai is that it has amazing snorkeling. It has Waimea Canyon, which is about as big as the Grand Canyon. It has amazing waterfalls. Like, these are just things that are there naturally, and so people want to go and experience them. It could also be heritage sites. So in DC, these monuments and things in the national government, that is our cultural heritage, having this capital city. So that is a primary tourist site. Secondary tourism resources are anything that supports tourism. Hotels, restaurants, shopping, traveling around the city, like city buses, tour buses, any entertainment that's going on, like movie theaters and concert venues, all that stuff is secondary tourism resources. All right. So countries try to figure out, like, what do we need to build to support tourism so that people will come? But if you go too far, then you end up ruining the primary thing that the people came to see anyways. So I think of like Cancun. It's like they try to get people to go down there for spring break and stuff because it's like this gorgeous beach, but then it gets like trashed by all the college students that end up there. And it's like, at some point, are you going to lose what's special about that place because you've gone all in with all the gaudy stuff? Or Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is definitely gaudy if you've ever been there. So sustainable tourism fights against that idea that you should just build, add, get as many people there as possible. Sustainable tourism is the opposite. Sustainable tourism is you're trying to like meet the needs of people that want to tour that area now, but you're going to also make sure that it's taken care of for the future. So are you protecting the society? Are you keeping their cultural heritage alive? Or are you supporting their food systems or their food culture? Or are people just going and having McDonald's even though there's like local foods they could be eating? Or are they staying at the Hilton when they could be staying at a bed and breakfast or like some other lodging that's run by locals? Economic is like, are locals able to get jobs and make money, or are they kicked out because it's too expensive to live there? And environmental health is the easiest to think of with sustainability. It's like, do you take care of the environment? So like I said with Cancun, are you ruining the beach by having so many people go there? Because if you ruin the beach, and the whole point people are going to the beach is to go to the beach, and then the beach isn't there, You got no beach tourism. Sorry, Cancun. And sustainable can be urban or rural. So this is another option for the IA. How much is DC sustainable? Or are they doing too much? Are things going to wear down at some point? So sustainable tourism is like a goal. You can't be like 100% sustainable, but you can try to become as sustainable as possible. So they like asking that question on the exam, and I'll probably ask you too. Like, how much can you even make it sustainable? People are going to screw up stuff. You can't control them. A similar idea, which is more about the natural environment, is ecotourism, which is quote unquote green tourism, like, you know, you're taking care of the environment, but you're going to see that physical location to admire it and try to protect it. So sustainable could be ecotourism, but sustainable tourism could be in a city. But ecotourism is always out in nature. You're going to see the waterfall, or you're going to see the canyon, or you're going to see the majestic green hills. I don't know why people would go see majestic green hills, but you know what I mean. But sometimes these green tourists, they could do things that hurt the society and hurt the economy in the area, like people who camp and then they're bringing in outside food and they're setting fires and they're maybe attracting wildlife that shouldn't live there, or maybe they're causing environmental destruction that they didn't know they were causing because they're ignorant and they're just trying to like cook up some meat. Like, ecotourism like is supposed to be about stewardship, but it doesn't always end up that way. All right, so I gave you lots of different terms to think about. Hopefully you're thinking like, wow, tourism is way more complicated and interesting than I thought. Hopefully it's not just too complicated. And we'll talk about this in class, so feel free to come in with questions, and I'll see you soon. Bye.